Hi, friends. Welcome to Adobe Live Photoshop Challenge Day 2. So, for those of you who caught me on the last one, we're going to be revisiting on the topic of typography. I specifically want to explore how we can distort, texturize, and find some really cool new perspectives on our typography approach. I love creating new headlines when it comes to headline fonts because there's so much room there for creativity. So I love exploring that. So I'm going to say a quick hello to the chat here. I can see Robert, I can see Barbara Font, not fun, Barbara. But yes, I have an accent. All right, we have General Kenobi, we have Frank. So, folks, thank you for being on the chat. So awesome. Say hello to each other. I'm so happy to be here with y'all. So I'm going to jump into Photoshop. I hope you do too. Open up Photoshop alongside with me. And for today, we have a specific asset that you have access to. So check out on the chat, there should be a link to this asset. So the goal in this one is for you to start getting acquainted with the way that smart vector objects can work in your favor for future uses. So in this template, when you come across it, when you download it and explore it, you're going to find that there's three different styles in here, and these are just what they are, right? But the goal here for me, for you, is to explore this. When you double click, you have your workable font still live for you to change it up for something else, right? Like Adobe Live. You can change up the font, the color, about anything in this category. So I want you to explore that because that's going to be really interesting for you to create different fonts of your own and see how you can still keep a workable file. So for example, in this one, I'm going to change it up to a different color as well so you can see how it works. All right, so press OK here, press save. And then when I go back to my next one, right, you can see Adobe Live got updated, which is super cool. And we have a new updated color as well. So play around with that. That should be really fun for you to explore and the freebies and the giveaway assets of today's challenge. So let's jump in here into our fonts. I'm going to create some of these effects and explore different ways that we can distort, transform, and really texturize our fonts. So when I explore my files, I want you to take note of how I've organized them because this is going to be important. So I've got a file that is going to be a workable file right here, and that's just the font by itself. And then I have a vector that's still also workable. I can still edit it, right? There's things like this. But because we're stepping into this texturized space, a lot of these effects work best on a rasterized file. So I've got this in hand just in case. So my canvas, by the way, it's black, but also in this rasterized file, I've unified a background with my text. I notice it has a better functionality when I add these textures. So for this one, this first effect, we can use a working file. So I'm gonna leave one as is, so I can always reference it. But in this one, Make Waves is inspired by just woman empowerment. And I love the idea of us empowering women to make waves, to really make those moves, right? And go forward. So I'm going to be playing with that concept of make waves. Let's right click this. Yeah. Okay, let's right click this and find ourselves in the warp text. This is a very simple way to achieve a lot of different transformations to your live text. So we have things like arching, we have bulge, we have shell lower. Things like this have so much opportunity and potential to be something really cool and very funky. I often come across stuff like this all across here in Austin. There's a lot of very groovy attitudes here, and I absolutely love that. So fonts like this are perfect to modify, but still keep that live font so that if you want to change the text, if you want to change the copy, you still can, right? So that's how you access that, and countless of other presets essentially that are here stylistically for you to affect your live font. So that's the difference here. Our font is live. We can always modify it. So Adobe Live. That's pretty cool, right? I do like make waves. I'm going to stick to make waves here and move on to the next one. So what's going to be important here is if I want to rasterize this layer, I'm going to hit Command J there, right click, look for rasterize that for some reason is either down here or up here, but it moves around, folks. I don't know why. And one of the things that I love doing is using this little tool right here that I often actually use for rasterize layers, but that tends to be like an image, not typography. But in this case, it's a perfect fit. So I'm going to create a smaller brush, with the bracket here, and increase the sort of analog look to my waves, right? We can start really blurring the edges. Now there's something really cool here to play around with as well. If you increase the size of your brush, it can start to really distort all of the RGB channels too. And that can get really, really interesting in terms of adding texture to your font. So I'm gonna get out of full frame here and continue to pull these. So if I change this to normal, it's going to change the way that I blur it too. So if I make this a little bit bigger and start moving that around, I don't know if you can see it here across, but if you change it from hue to normal, it adds a different kind of texture. Let's say here I added to darken. It can also kind of bring out a different texture, which may or may not be visible for y'all. Let's see. And that's just using the smudge tool, right? You can see we've added a bit of waves. We've added some really gnarly textures in here. So that's pretty cool. All right, so let's move on to type here. And I want to talk about an effect called displacement. So when I'm going to look actually for a file here real quick for y'all. Let me get out of this. While Photoshop is thinking, hi, Photoshop. So I'm going to open it up here and show you what I've created earlier. So let's see. There you are. All right, I found it. So I've got these files here. These files are really important to make because essentially what they're composed of are patterns made out of gradients. And this is a really cool way to create really interesting textures within your files. So I made this one and I made the circular one. They're just gradients on top of each other. So I'm going to open up this file here and I'm going to show you how it functions in a rasterized file. So I'll copy that file, which is live. We got a live text file. And I'm going to create a background for this file. It's going to be black. So I love just hitting Shift X or Shift X to toggle my foreground and background, and Shift D to make them black and white. Okay, so I'm going to fill in, do Shift X to toggle that background and just fill that layer, right? And Shift X to toggle that background and add some white to my text. Pretty fast, right? Pretty chill. So now we're gonna hit Command E to merge that, and it will automatically make it a rasterized file. So when I go into this, there's so many different opportunities here to play around, but we're gonna play with the displacement options. So we're going to go into a filter gallery and go into this effect called glass and zoom in here a little bit more. All right, so immediately as soon as I add glass, I actually have some options here to play with to add some really neat textures, but they're a little bit much. So as you saw, I created some patterns of my own. So in this little tiny button here, you're gonna be able to upload those textures that I just showed you. So this texture right here and this texture right here are my options. So long as you create anything with a black and white gradient, meaning you're defining those highlights, midtones, and shadows, that's how it's understanding what pattern to do. So there could be so many options here. So because I added that circle one, it creates that effect. If I add the line one, it will create, ooh, where'd you go? Here you go. If we add the line one, it creates this effect. How cool is that? I mean, to me, textures, fonts are some of my favorite things to do, especially when it comes to Photoshop. Photoshop is such a place for you to play and get really weird. So it makes no sense to just keep a type as a digital crisp type if you can mess with it, right? So from here, I didn't quite make this one. This is the circular one, but you can see so many cool opportunities if you play with those effects, and I absolutely love it. The reason why I put it in a black background, by the way, is because you can play with your color modes. So you can do things like this, depending on what colors or textures you have below it. And of course, you can always do a quick screen or multiply if you want to create maybe a background on it. So let's say I'm going to put this background here. So if you want to do something like this, it could be really, really cool. And the black is now totally gone. Obviously, there's the font right below that. There it is. So you see, that's an easy way to still make it work, even though I had to add that black background. Sorry, I can hear myself echoing. It's so funny. All right, so I love this. I think this looks really cool. Let's see if we have time for more. I'm going to jump into this S. I absolutely love treating characters by themselves. In this case, I just decided to do an S because it's a beautiful form. It's just this curvilinear letter. So we're going to go into this new artboard. By the way, let me know in the chat if you're a fan of artboards, because I love artboards. I use them for everything. What are the size of my textures then? Well, I did make the canvas 1080 by 1920 vertical. So that. And the lines can differ. It really is no hard rule. You can make it any shape you want, so long as you use a black and white gradient, it will read it. So does a mud puddle, what? Sometimes there's some funny conversations happening on here. All right, cool. So moving on to this really cool letter S, right? Everything is sweet. We're running through and we've got a new option to play with. So on this S, oops, I'm in my second monitor there. All right. So on this S, I've got some options. Can I do things with it as a vector, potentially from live type to vector type to rasterized type? Those are options, right? So what if I convert this to a smart object? I've got some things that I can do here. I can go into the blur gallery and do some tilt shift. And it's going to kind of have these options here for me that are going to behave differently if I have them as a vector object. Part of that reason is because it's going to have a live effect at all times. So I absolutely love doing this, but more so on a rasterized file. So I'm going to hit cancel there. It's sometimes unfortunate, but if you wanted to create a wave effect here and right click here, you could do it. Let's see here. I'm not going to do that because I think it's going to take up too much time, but you can do it on a vector file and it will work just fine. So in a rasterized file, let's unite these two fronts. So I can create my rasterized file like it did earlier. So let's convert this to a white. Command backspace is all I do there. So long as my color is in that background, we're good to go. And we're just going to unite them by hitting Command E. And that rasterizes my file. Okay, so I've got my rasterized file now. I'm going to go revisit that blur gallery. And I'm going to start by hitting Tilt Shift. So tilt shift can get really aggressive right from the start. So you kind of want to lower those a little bit. Yeah, that's looking much better. Okay, so as I move around this, I'm gonna probably zoom out to 100. There you go. So as I move around here, I want to move this circle a little closer to the center. And I notice it can get a little bit tricky to move it around. So I do use my arrows here because at some point it does start to rotate and do a lot of random things. The rotation is right here. And when you bring this closer down, those are the areas that are going to be affected by our blur, which you currently don't see. But as I move this toggle, this little circle right here, do you see it? This little circle. As I move it up, it really strengthens that blur. And so I don't really have to navigate these tools right here on the right hand side. Not really. It's very dynamic when it comes to the tool itself for you to use it manually and on basically live. So I can change the intensity, right? So I like that a lot and that looks super cool to me. Press OK. And I just created that on my rasterized file. I'm going to hit Command J to copy it. General Kenobi says spinning, that's a cool trick. I hope you're referring to this. Can't really tell. I feel like I have to have an ear on the chat at all times. Okay, so I'm gonna have this texture now, and I'm gonna go one step further and add a little bit more texture by going into color halftones. So as we go into color halftones here, we're gonna have some options. I think your defaults are different digits. I found that some of these are fun to play with because each one is targeting a different color channel. So if you do 20 here and 80 here, you're going to get only 2 colors as opposed to getting all 4. And the max radius is really the size of your pixel. So if you do something like, I don't know, 40, it's going to do something like this, which is a really, really giant halftone. Halftones are based out of CMYK print, right? The way the halftone dots kind of fall onto the paper, right? So this is usually composed of CMYK, and that's why those channels are available. We have here a different way to do this too, by making it a small halftone radius. And so far I'm targeting 2 colors, but I can also target another color here and add a bit more of those colors within there. And you can see it's a lot smaller. And what's cool here is that I did it in a separate file, so I can always mask it with black holding Option or Alt and just bring it back slowly by adding white to the mask in the areas that I want to bring back. And I could even lower that intensity by lowering the opacity slightly to 2, 3, 4. I use my keyboard quite a lot, folks. So let me know if this is working for y'all. But you can see there how you're able to add it back into that. So this effect here, this effect that you're seeing here, it's part of a background effect, which I can quickly demonstrate too, so you can see, and we can show it on this one. But there's so many ways to make a rasterized file create something brand new, but still have a dynamic ability just because it has that black background, which means we're able to we're going to be able to add it to any file afterwards, like something like this, right? So you can add it to your final artwork, which we will be creating here along the days. We're going to be exploring a lot of collaging. So this headline fonts are going to be really cool for something like this. So I'm thinking whether I should do that background here or in this one. I'm going to do it in this one. So in this one, I've got these options here that I've created for myself so that I can separate all of the different effects. So I'm going to turn off these for now so you can see how it works. So in the background, in order to create these really cool effects, we want to fill in this background with a color of your choice. Really, any color will do. The effects will vary depending on that color that you choose. So I'll fill it in as that for now. Hi, that is a funky color variation. Don't know why, but we'll find out. Okay, oh, it's because I have my gradient map on top. So you're going to find the gradient map under here, for those of you who don't know, and it's down here, gradient map. That creates a separate layer. And all of this is being affected by that separate layer, these two. So it's built up of, or composed of, three: background, brush, gradient. That's how it works, right? And then we'll add our type on top. So the goal here is that in your brush, literally I've done nothing in my brush, but in my gradient, I've made it pin light. That's why you see that color variation. I love using just changing the mode is so peculiar. It can give you so many different styles. So under brush, I can begin to brush in here and create, I don't know, a letter of my choice, essentially. And it all kind of differs based on what color you choose here. So if I use maybe a black, it can do something like this. And I'm going to just add this in reverse. My cat is meowing. I don't know if you can hear her, but it's so hilarious. She's just like, "Meow." She really loves going outside. That's the thing. So, all right. So here you go. We have this brush and we're going to continue playing with it. And this effect can really shift fairly quickly. So we do pin light on these. Let's say if I can do a different color. You can do something like that. It's kind of tricky, honestly, because it all differs on the color. And every single time I get a different result depending on what brushes I'm using. I mean, sorry, what color palette I'm using. So you can do so many cool things here and translate those textures over. But I love doing things like this over onto these textures, because now on textures like this, I'm just going to finalize it here by bringing this over so you can see how dynamic it can be. So textures like this, I can duplicate and send them over to other areas. So we can send them over to other artboards. That's what I meant to say. Okay, so make waves, and we can send it over here. We can see it went over to this one, and we can, from here, put it to screen mode. I'll delete these other ones. And if you put it to screen mode, everything, all of these options are possible, right? You can go through screen mode, which removes the black, makes it super dynamic. You can still scale it to a certain distance, of course, because the size you made it in will determine. But even the halftone dots converting into different textures can be super cool in this effects. So there's a lot of fun to have there, folks. So I hope this was really interesting for you to start playing with new styles, new ideas when it comes to your typography. I absolutely love exploring typography in ways that aren't expected, because sometimes type can be the main lead of your poster, right? The star of your poster. So thank you so much for being on the chat. It's always fun to be here on Adobe Live with you folks on any different workflow. So I hope to see you on the next one. Again, my name is Cyn Lagos. See you on the other side. Ciao.